Hi there, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and today we're going to cover step parenting. If you are parenting a child and you are having a hard time with your sensitive child calling up that unconditional love, that true understanding connection with your sensitive kid because they are stuck in the meltdown or refusal cycle, then make sure that you stay tuned. So today we're going to talk about the challenges that step-parents can have when parenting sensitive kids, sensitive teens stuck in the meltdown shutdown cycle. So first, let's describe what that cycle is, right? If you are parenting a child who is hitting, kicking, screaming, yelling at you, threatening you, saying things like life would be better off without them, and this behavior is relevant for and true for children who are having daily meltdowns, ages 4 and up. Highly sensitive kids who are having daily meltdowns, even at the age of 2, it's not developmentally appropriate. So we want to look at frequency as well as how long this has been lasting. Your sensitive child, if they are having such intense aggressive moments for a child at the age of 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, then this is clearly something that you need to be paying attention to. And your child is stuck in the meltdown cycle. Your whole family is. And we're here to address that. That's our specialty here at MTC. We help parents of sensitive kids and teens break out of that meltdown shutdown cycle. And we can do that with families with that support that we provide directly in as little as 8 weeks even. And so when we think about parents who are trying to support their children, even teenagers who are shutting down, you don't get me, you don't understand, this is too big, I can't do it, I won't do it, related to homework, schoolwork, etc. There's obviously a completely different dynamic when you insert a step parent into the equation, right? But with that being said, the challenges that parents or step parents are dealing with in the meltdown cycle, it's really important for you to understand because there's a clear difference between meltdown cycle behavior and adjustment behavior, right? So if you're remarried or in the process of dating, moving towards marriage, or partnering, long-term commitment with an adult, so the parent of the sensitive kid in question, and you're struggling to also figure out where you can support your partner in this parenting relationship and the dynamic of understanding your role as well as building trust with your sensitive child. It's important to understand that part of the challenges that you might see for children who are adjusting to a change in parenting when step parents become part of the equation. This is to be expected. Children can regress in their behavior or exhibit irritable or challenging behavior for a period of time, whether they're highly sensitive or not. With that being said, the frequency and intensity is what we look at when we talk about the meltdown cycle. If your child's behavior is so intense that there's meltdowns happening at all beyond the age of 4, and especially daily or multiple times a day or multiple times a week, then we have a significant issue going on. And this is a family dynamic issue. It's not a concern that it is just related to your child's experience of the world. And so this is really important for you to be paying attention to, especially if you're a step parent who is just trying to read all of the things and digest everything, or if you're a parent and you're working to integrate a new parent into a new partner into the parenting relationship, then this is relevant as well. So it's important to tease out the difference between how divorce and parental separation and parental remarriage or repartnering can impact the situation that you're dealing with, but also really, really important to notice what is the meltdown cycle symptoms. And so we cover that at length consistently in our videos trainings and podcasts here at MTC that are free for you guys and available. And with that being said, let's talk about the specific issues that and I'm going to speak to you being a step parent. Okay, so be sure that if this is related to you and you're not a step parent, just hear it from this lens. We're here to support you as well. So, as a step parent, right, we notice that you'll notice there's an adjustment period. You are an adult in the home, and it's also true that you're not the adult. Your child, the highly sensitive child in question, was planning for or expecting, right? And it's important for you to notice that if this is a new transition or a newer transition, under a year experience, then obviously there's going to be some challenging adjustments to be made with your sensitive child and building that relationship. Knowing that, right, this is relevant for any age, 2 through 18 plus, right? Even when my grandfather remarried after my grandmother died, I was 6. A couple years later, I remember my mom and her sisters, who were still alive at the time, all having their own emotional response to my papa remarrying. And even though she was a family friend and the relationship was companionship focused, right? And to combat loneliness, which we know obviously is a much bigger risk for the elderly population in their later years, it still feels different when you introduce a second adult, a different adult in the household. So that part's normal. Okay, let's cover that. That part's to be expected, and emotions are to be expected. Negative emotions, loss, grief, to be expected. Then we look at the unexpected emotions, the atypical experience, and this is what is going on with highly sensitive kids, and the behavior is what I'm talking about here, not the experience. I'm not saying that highly sensitive children are atypical or abnormal. That's not it at all. Highly sensitive people make up 1 out of every 5, which means 20% of the population is highly sensitive. And treating highly sensitive children like abnormal is actually part of what keeps them in the highly sensitive meltdown cycle, okay? And it's important to notice that highly sensitive children do not have to be living in a meltdown cycle. This is our whole life's mission at MTC, my life's mission as well, because the meltdown cycle leads to serious risky behaviors like chronic suicidality, chronic self-harm, and chronic risky behaviors, promiscuity, substance abuse, aggression, etc., in adolescence or in adulthood. At worst case, and then obviously best case, is just people-pleasing workaholism, where the sensitive child just learns to stuff their emotions and pretend to be non-highly sensitive, and expect themselves to make everybody happy, because they are more prone to shame in the meltdown cycle. And so when we think about breaking out of this pattern, so obviously neither of those pictures for your stepchild's future, for your child's future, are pretty, right? None of that's pretty. So let's look at what the ideal situation can be. You can build a relationship with your stepchild, because the definition of parenting has nothing to do with biology, right? It has everything to do with the role that you play and the relationship that you're looking to build. And in parenting, Webster talks about the definition being relevant to caring for someone in role of a parent, which is to use the definition of a word in its own definition, right? Thanks, Webster. We're focusing on raising a child to be emotionally healthy, especially in these days. That's where attachment theory comes into play, but it's not the whole picture, as well as teaching children to safely advocate for themselves, safely set limits, and make creative problem-solving decisions. All of those things go into play in terms of raising any child, and especially a highly sensitive child. And if you are the person taking on that role as one of the primary caregivers, then we consider you a parent, right? That's important. So when we think about that in terms of supporting your child, the important piece, and I say child just because I'm not going to say child, teen, adolescent, 6 words to say the same thing. But make sure that you understand we work with children and parents. We work with parents whose kids are ages 2 through 18. So this is not just a little kid problem we talk about. All these meltdowns, none of these are little kid problems. These are highly sensitive kids stuck in the meltdown cycle, and we work with countless parents of 12, 13-year-olds, etc., as well as 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds who we work with directly alongside their parents. The high schoolers need understanding and need to learn more about themselves differently alongside their parents and through their parents. So that research is clear. And we follow what works. We do the science-based strategy here at MTC. And so when we think about the important component about step parenting, and it can bring up a lot of guilt, right? If you're not able to connect to your sensitive kid, you can feel like maybe you weren't cut out for this, worried that maybe you don't have, questioning whether or not you have appropriate parenting instincts because you didn't start from birth, right? And with that being said, I have to tell you that everything can be taught. This is really important. We hear from parents of sensitive kids who did start from birth, whether it was biological or via adoption, that their sensitive child and the struggles that they're having with their sensitive child started at a very young age. And parents of highly sensitive kids who are not step parents can experience guilt, frustration, aggravation, disappointment at any stage, especially when stuck in the meltdown cycle. Those emotional experiences are pretty pervasive. So, what did I get myself into? This is not what I expected parenting to be. Questioning yourself as a parent, questioning your instincts as a parent, and thinking that you might not be good enough to parent your child. And so if you're a step parent and you're thinking all of these things, it's important for you to notice that's a symptom of the meltdown cycle or the shutdown cycle. That is not a knock on your particular parenting to say that every single thing that you're doing is wrong or broken. Right now, obviously, the strategy that you're using, we'll talk about what works so you stop feeling like that. Right. But it is really important to notice that if you're going in that direction of questioning yourself or going in the direction of wondering whether or not this child in your care is a jerk, if they're manipulating you, if you are just, not cut out for this, then all of those emotional experiences we hear time and time again with parents just getting started with us. And this is an experience that is akin to the meltdown and shutdown cycle. So it's important for you to notice that. Okay. So with that being said, this is a fixable problem. Okay. So you might wonder, how do I know that? Right. Well, I've been doing this for over a decade, and we've helped hundreds of families through this avenue alone, and through the coaching systems that we've created. And with that being said, parenting, childlike relationships was not my forte. I babysat growing up in young adolescence. With that being said, I wasn't good at it. I wasn't naturally playful. I wasn't naturally engaging. It didn't come as natural to me as it did, for example, my sister, who would get down and dirty and play and was super active, etc., with the kiddos. And so when I was babysitting back in the day, I only did that for a little while, and I moved into the restaurant business because I was more capable of relating to adults than I was in relating to children. Now, with that being said, obviously, I'm very successful at what I do, and I train consistent, hundreds of parents a year. And we work with, and I have a team, 2 teams, if you count the other private practice business, where I've trained many professionals on how to relate effectively and have fun with children, and I parent my child the same way. So clearly, I can be an example to you that even if you don't have those innate skills, you can use that history for yourself to learn that this skill can be taught. Okay, a lot of parenting actually is not innate. Especially the parenting that we talk about here at MTC, which is emotional focused, emotion regulation skill focused, as well as setting effective boundaries that doesn't set kids up for judging themselves, helps children maintain a perspective that they can and that they are capable and that they can be creative. All of those strategies that we teach, all of those tactics that we teach that fit into the strategy, the system that I built over the years, they're not typically innate. They're not typically intuitive, because what is intuitive in our society? Intuitive in our society is trying to parent the way you were parented, or trying to parent the opposite of the way that you were parented. And none of that is based in science. It's just based in anecdotes. It's just based in your own perspective of history. And that is reactive. And it's the same kind of reactivity that our parents parented us with when they didn't have the research that we have now in today's day and age. And so we would call that, and I refer to that more often as traditional parenting, right? So lecturing, removing privileges to teach, as a tactic to teach, sharing, that you're disappointed in a child to try to motivate somebody, all of those behaviors, yelling, spanking, writing lines, grounding, etc. All of those traditional behaviors that moved out of severe corporal punishment, which was used when children weren't seen as children, hundreds of years ago, and even in some families today without proper education on what helps children, or insight. With that being said, even if you're not using corporal punishment, it's highly likely corporal punishment is spanking, or sitting on rice, nose to the door, any other sort of severe punishment, to engage your child in teaching them that they're learning, which none of that actually works. So even if you're not using corporal punishment to try to teach your kid, a lot of the strategies that you're likely using are either passive or permissive or pressuring. And so, you might feel compelled to try to just be this child's friend, your kid's friend, your stepkid's friend. If they don't follow my directions, if they just yell at me, then maybe I just need to focus more on the relationship and help them see that I'm a normal human being, and we can laugh and joke, and then I'll just wait till my partner gets home, and then they can handle the discipline component. Now, discipline means to teach, right? So the teaching component, what you're teaching, you're an adult in the home, so you're definitely teaching, whether you like it or not. So trying to be your stepkid's friend is not working. You already know that, because sometimes you will need to have them follow directions, like sitting at the table, or joining the family, or getting in the car in a timely fashion, leaving when you're picking them up, keeping their seatbelt on, etc. And all of that is relevant no matter the kid's age, okay? And so you will need to set limits. You will need your stepchild to follow limits. So trying to be their friend or trying to cater to their every whim does not work. None of those strategies create a sense of safe relationship with an adult to child. And so it's important to not follow that, right? And then the next thing that is important for you, you might be trying to address this issue by just trying to shower them with gifts. So, or shower them with love, bending over backwards, and then expecting the biological parents to manage behavior, and that also leaves a lot of room for growth in your family dynamic. And so it is important to notice how your stepchild can respond effectively to you as a step parent, who is expecting rules to be followed in the home, but it needs to be done in a loving way rather than a way that has you carry this a spirit of being offended by your child's behavior. And that requires a lot of understanding related to research in parenting sensitive kids. But the understanding of breaking out of the meltdown cycle is not frequently spoken about in research. So Elaine Aron will talk about in her research, and she's the one who coined the phrase back in the 90s, highly sensitive child, and the research use name sensory processing sensitivity. She speaks about how meltdowns are just part of the game. And so then if you're reading her work, then you might start to believe that falsehood that parenting sensitive kids either means that you need to wait forever for them to grow, and just let them do it on their own, which doesn't actually work, or you need to just be gentle. And gentle is important, right, in terms of communicating effectively, but it is not the whole picture, and it actually can be quite passive in a parenting style for sensitive kids in a way that actually creates a lack of safety in the home. Sensitive kids need boundaries, they need safety, they need to know that they can trust adults who can keep them safe by saying no, and those no's need to be delivered in an effective way that doesn't actually add shame. So we talked about this as well. So you got to pay attention to that. All of these tactics, even reading a bunch, having Monday morning quarterback meetings at the end of the day, which I realize is a U.S. reference. So, if for our international listeners, what I'm focusing on is just noticing, just trying to run down the whole day and see where you can pinpoint, pick and choose of what where you can pivot differently next time. All of that, in addition to just constantly trying to consume information, none of that leads to transformation. And that's what your child needs. Your child needs a transformation in the family dynamic, and that needs to come from the top, you and your partner. As well as if you are co-parenting with an ex-spouse or ex-partner, that is obviously ideal that all of the households are in alignment and working together to follow the same system. With that being said, if a household has two parents and holds at least half of the custody, then we've seen success with where parents can, especially those who work with us, where one household in divorced households can affect significant change, even if the ex-spouse is not engaging in the work that we do. Knowing that, however, there are some stipulations, right? Like I said, corporal punishment does not work. You cannot try to use effective strategies in one household and then use corporal punishment, which is quite traumatizing for sensitive kids. And that inconsistency will absolutely break the spirit of a sensitive child. And so that's incredibly important. And in either two households, multiple homes, or even in one home, where you might read generalized parenting strategies and say that a child needs just one adult who can be a positive role model, and that is not true for sensitive kids. Sensitive kids need consistency. They don't need just one adult. So if there's two adults in the home, you need two adults to be participating in the change of the relationship. Because again, like I said, what changes a child's behavior who's stuck in the meltdown cycle is an approach to the family dynamic. And so if you've got two adults, one adult working on affecting that change and one adult who is just saying, nope, don't need any change, irrelevant to me, then obviously the family dynamic isn't going to shift for many, many years. And that's going to be a lose-lose situation for everybody involved. So when we think about being able to shift out of that, the first things first, as a step parent, you need to be focusing on is supporting your partner and understanding what works for highly sensitive kids. So let's focus on that. First thing, you need to be able to assume, right, decide that you are an awesome parent. Again, I talked about, in spite of all of the worries and concerns you have that you weren't cut out for this, the fact that you're learning, the fact that you're trying to shift this is a sign that you are an awesome parent. Now, that means that you need to start developing awesome skills, okay? And one of those awesome skills is learning that your child is also awesome through and through. They're not manipulative. They're not here to try to get control out of you or any of that. The brain is not developed in a child enough to do that. So you have to break out of that assumption. And when you do that, then you can clearly understand that really all you're working on is teaching your sensitive kids those skills through the relationships that matter most, and that is the parent-child relationship. The parent-child relationship is the change agent for sensitive kids. It is not a relationship with anybody else. No therapist, no doctor, no mentor, no big brother, big sister, official or or in the household. I mean, like in terms of those volunteer mentors. None of that, teacher, none of that will be as impactful as the parent-child relationship for sensitive kids. And this is critically important for you because when you think about being able to break out of that pattern, it is very, very clear that sensitive children change their behavior specifically not through their relationship with their parents, whereas non-highly sensitive kids can change their behavior by just getting introspective and insightful. Insight is blocked in the meltdown cycle for sensitive kids, and that's incredibly important to break out of that pattern. You need to be able to do that by observing how to teach your child without shame-based parenting, and focus on being strategic and showing your child how they can grow without, not only without shame, but also through play. Okay. So those are the 4 components that we teach our clients. And obviously it's much more effective to do that when you're working with an expert who is capable of holding you accountable to following through, because there are a ton of pieces of reactive misinformation out in the world in terms of what's going to remind you of what you used to believe in parenting. And if you're learning new information, just like speaking a foreign language, you're going to need to practice. You're going to need to speak around fluent people. And that requires work in a more pervasive setting than just one-on-one working with a tutor, for example. So if you think about being able to speak the highly sensitive language, like speaking a foreign language, obviously immersion is much more effective than just a strategy of meeting once a week, right? Studying Spanish, for example, once a week is going to get you to use the bathroom in a Spanish-speaking in a Spanish-speaking country. It's going to get you to be able to maybe order a coffee, maybe figure out how to pay. But when we're thinking about pay for items, or ask if they speak English. But you can't practice learning a new language, learning a new operating system once a week for an hour. So expecting your child to do that is completely mismatched, and expecting you to do that is no wonder you're stuck if you've been trying to do that yourself, right? It might be that I'm not just referring to those of you who have tried therapy before. Because obviously that's the therapy model, an hour a week, and then maybe some coping skills to practice on outside of the session, 5 minutes here or there, a couple times a week. That's not what we're talking about entirely. It could be just that you are spending Sundays reading books about being highly sensitive. Could be just that you are talking to friends and having play dates every once in a while with parents whose highly sensitive kids aren't having meltdowns. But what you don't know is maybe that child is really struggling in going to school and advocating and having a conversation with the teacher about how the fact that they feel stuck. So perhaps they're showing up more like a people pleaser rather than screaming from the rooftops that they're stuck and afraid and worried and nervous all the time. But that doesn't mean that your friends' sensitive kids are really getting on effectively if the parent doesn't speak the language. So we got to focus on that, right? Just like I said, as a step parent, you can learn this too. If I was able to learn it throughout my career, I've been able to shrink that timeline for you. We can certainly do that and address that for the parents that we work with directly. But we focus on the ability to teach you the high level view of the system here. And you've heard, if this is not the first training that you've heard me speak on, you've heard what our system composes of, right? And the understanding that this challenge needs to be addressed from you as the adult is not just based in personal experience. Now, obviously, we've got hundreds of data points, so that's a pretty good personal experience list, right? But it's also focused on the research. It's focused on the research of Elaine Aron, who speaks that the parent-child relationship does need to change. Now, with that being said, she has a pretty ineffective view of what's actually possible for sensitive people. And that's where I focus and where she and I differ. And then when we focus on understanding Plewis's research, understanding Marshall Linehan's research, there are plenty of other researchers in sensitivity, biological sensitivity that we've studied here at MTC. With that being said, it's not the full picture. You also need to shift, and that requires a full understanding of general human behavior. General adult human behavior, which is different than child behavior. And that's where that two-part focus needs to come into play in your ability to manage your own emotions and your ability to teach that this is possible. And you have to shift how you think in in your daily life, and being able to do that effectively first in parenting, so you can see those quick results like I talked about. Because just having a quick conversation for several weeks is not going to cut it. So it needs to be more of an immersive experience to turn this around. So being able to support your family is something that we are happy to do, especially given the circumstance of divorce, separation, and how that impacts the family dynamic, as well as how that impacts your child directly. Obviously, to figure out if we were a fit to serve your family, we would have to have a conversation, because there are multiple dynamics that can come into play when divorce is relevant, or parental separation is relevant. So we need to make sure that we were fit before we were to agree to work together. And the best way we know how to do that is to actually have a conversation with you, talk to you on the phone. So go ahead and book your call, meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk or meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk, to have a conversation with our team. All right. Break down where you're stuck, what your goals are for your whole family unit, and whether or not we can help you. And if we can't help you, right, because if our system is most effective for families in a different dynamic, then we will tell you that. It's incredibly important that we maintain our 98.9% success rate. What is that from? It's from all of the families who are perfect fits, who come into the work that we have, and they do it, right? So the 1.1% are families who say, yes, I want to do it, and then struggle in getting started. But 1% is a pretty high, it's a pretty good number if I ask myself, in terms of families who struggle, okay, with what we do. And with that being said, knowing that, it's important for us, like I said, to maintain that success rate means that we are of high integrity, not going to tell you that we can help you if we can't. So we'll point you in that direction if that's the case. So again, go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk, meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk if you're parenting a high schooler. And we'll go ahead and have that conversation together, myself or a team member, one of my coaches who's specifically trained in ensuring that we make sure that we're only inviting families who apply to work with us who are a good fit. Okay. And if that's the case, then you can get started right away. If it's not the case, then we teach you exactly what you need to do in order to find different resources to get started on solving your problem right away. So either way, it's a win-win, and we're happy to serve in that capacity. Okay, so that's it for me today.